amazing guest speaker, Stephanie Nitsch, and introducing her today is Colin from Company F.
So Steph Nitsch is a freelance rider within the mountain sports industry and a co-founder of Pallas Snowboards, a manufacturer of progressive women's snowboards. A two-time UW Business School reject, she learns to forge her own path and establish 2 successful businesses, along with a handful of other passion projects. Through trial, error, and labor of love, she lives in Rossland, British Columbia in the summers, and Salt Lake City, Utah in the winters, and believes that adventure is the magic ingredient in life.
Thank you so much, Colin. And thank you everyone for joining me this afternoon. I'm super excited to be here and chat with you about adventure in business. And I actually had a much more inline topic about adventure all queued up, and then I totally scratched it at the last minute, and I'm pivoting back to a presentation I gave 2 years ago at Washington Business Week, because the topic was just so juicy and it was so fun to share something that we just don't really get to talk about very often and celebrate. So if any of you were here 2 years ago, thank you again for tuning in. Let me share my screen here. Before I do, I just want you to all open up your chat boxes, because I'm gonna ask that you chime in a little bit here and there throughout my presentation. And I just want the chat box queued up and ready to go when I'm asking you some questions. So give me a moment here. Oops. Let me redo that. Okay. Can you all see my screen, and is it big enough? It's full screen? Okay. Well, so again, thank you so much for joining me. And I hear that this is the eve or the afternoon before your final presentations. So I'll try to keep this short, but I do know that with all presentations comes a degree of a range of emotions. You're maybe excited, you're nervous, maybe like, holy crap, there's so much left to do and I'm not ready for this. Presentations can be nerve-wracking, especially when there's something really big on the line, because ultimately there's a chance you might mess it up and really drop the ball. But the good news is you've all had practice dropping the ball throughout life. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. So you've all got your chat boxes open there. And I want to know what you have failed at this week. Did you oversleep and miss the first camp session? Maybe you spilled pizza or coffee on your computer. Maybe you applied sunscreen wrong and just have like the most wicked, awful sunburn ever. I just want to hear what you think of when you think of failing this week. I'll give you a couple seconds to share what comes to mind. Anyone? I'm not sure if, oh, yes. Awesome. We all fail at homework. Happens all the time. Well, even if you don't want to share, that's okay. I know you've got some failures tucked up inside your head. And just sit on them, think about them for a little bit. But ultimately, if you failed, I want to congratulate you. Whether it was today or yesterday or at any point this week, I want you all to give yourself a little pat on the back, seriously, if you really did fail, I want you to literally pat yourself on the back, because you're a common failure. Like I said, I gave this presentation a couple of years ago, and if any of you here are returning students, I'm really glad you get to hear it a second time, because failure is an invaluable topic to master, and it's definitely worth a first listen, more so worth a second listen, and even worth a 20th listen here. To give you some background on me, as Colin said, I own 2 small businesses. I've been an independent freelance writer in the advertising and journalism worlds for over 10 years. And 8 years ago, I co-founded a women's snowboard company called Pallas Snowboards. I'm also an ambassador for a mountain bike company, and I dabble in photography, and I have failed over and over again in everything in my life. And you see, failing is not something that we celebrate enough on our path to success. And that applies to our career paths, our relationships, our hobbies and interests, just our life choices in general. And it's time that we redefine what failure actually means and what it looks like. So I want to get all on the same page here and talk about what we've been taught about failure. Failure, as we know it, is a lack of success, or it's aiming for a goal and totally missing the mark. It's disappointing someone or even ourselves, and it's losing value, it's losing what you value and care about, and really struggling to get it back. And we put so much into the negative side of failing. That's guilt, it's regret, it's anger, and it makes us feel really, really crappy. As I sit here and talk to you and in this small group, it reminds me of the first time I was public speaking when I stood on the stage. I was running for class president in 8th grade, and I had to give a speech in front of 400 fellow students. And I wasn't the most popular kid in school. However, I was running against the most popular kid in school. And I remember during my speech and the whole campaign of running, I promised some really unrealistic goals and ideas that I would accomplish if I were president of the student body. And I also remember getting laughed at a lot for those ideas. And it was really tough to keep my composure throughout that whole campaign. Of course, I didn't win. And I wasn't expecting to, but I still cried when the votes were announced at the end of the school day, because running for student body wasn't, it was more of a popularity contest than anything else. And for me, losing a popularity vote made me just feel crappy inside. I don't remember how I felt at school the next day or the day after that, but I do know that in the long term, I feel really empowered by that moment. I feel like I won. That speech was a lesson in humiliation and failure. And without it, I never would have known how powerful my voice and my ideas could travel. Public speaking will always be a little scary. I will always have a little shake in my voice, even amongst a small group. But 13-year-old me has taught 36-year-old me that fear is actually really exciting. And excitement is the catalyst for living and for succeeding. To do anything worthwhile in life means welcoming fear and choosing discomfort, because working through your discomfort expands your tolerance for fear. And it's a chance to prove your self-criticism wrong, to tell that inner voice that they're totally far off base. And I can comfortably say that you'll never achieve success without big failures. Even Steve Jobs, one of the most successful innovators of our time, believed in the powers of failing. Getting fired from Apple was, as he says, the best thing that could have happened to him because it taught him how to be a beginner again. And I don't think he could have articulated this more beautifully. Because you see, our path to success comes with a high level of expectations. And you get what's called the expert halo as you reach the top of your goal. It's where your ego clouds your judgment and it tells you that you can't mess up and that you're too experienced to learn something new or to start over. You also have more critics waiting to call you out when you're out of line or when you drop the ball. And that is so stressful for you. It traps you into a linear way of thinking. And for creative types out there like myself, that's a really dangerous path to be on because it funnels you into a single perspective and leaves you without room to explore other worlds, other ideas that could radically change your life or the world around you. Ultimately, having that expert halo leaves you with no ability to freely explore or harness the power of being a beginner. And a similar thing happened to me when in 2017, when I got let go from my dream job. I was working in Whistler, British Columbia, with one of the top advertising agencies in the outdoor industry. And I was hired to come up with ideas and come up with words to sell those ideas. But towards the end of my 2-year employment with them, things really started unraveling. I was overworked, I was stressed out, and all that catapulted into showing up to work every day without any ideas. And for a paid creative person, that might be one of the biggest fears of a person's career, is the moment when you have no ideas left to give, like poof, gone. That's exactly what happened. So I got laid off in first thing in the morning. But the funny thing is, within an hour of getting laid off, I was swinging in my hammock at home and my brain was spinning a million miles an hour with all the opportunities and directions I could go in. And within a few hours of that, I was giving my landlord my 30-day notice to move out and had already made the decision to leave Whistler and move to a new town. And in that moment, I was so freaking happy. It was not just this happiness for a new future or a new opportunity, but it was this happiness from accepting failure, and the opportunity that came from that to build something more, like far greater in my life and steer me towards a more purposeful life and career. New beginnings, super fun, super nerve-wracking, but I mentioned a minute ago that they're really powerful. Steve Jobs, really powerful when you're in a new beginning. And I want to explain why. So again, chat box is here. Let's kind of set some context here and get you guys into the headspace. I'd like to know what's the last thing you were a beginner at? Like what's something you tried for the first time recently? I want you to share that with the group and also include a single word about the emotion you felt before you started it. I'll give you a moment to think of something here. Awesome. I'm seeing some good responses here. I don't understand the last month, but maybe all of last month was just new and nerve-wracking. trying out for new things, new sports teams, new creative adventures. We feel dumb and excited and rickety. All these things are amazing and they're totally normal. Ultimately, beginnings are the starting point for anything new. It's the point where your skills are so incompetent, when you've got this big hill of knowledge to climb and everything is new and shiny. But you're standing at the bottom of that hill and it turns out it's actually kind of overwhelming and it looks a lot more like a mountain than a hill. And that's what it's like for every beginner. But beginnings are also a place where a lot of magic happens. It's probably where the most magic happens because everything is new. It's full of really juicy questions and knowledge and aha moments. And it's a chance to get away with ideas at every turn, at every base, at every click of a mouse. It's a chance to explore. And that's really, really important because exploring in a beginner zone gives you a judgment-free zone. It gives you the ability to let your curiosity lead you in new directions. And the fun thing is that, especially when you start as a group, we're all beginners at something, right? That we're all in it together and there's no ego, there's no hierarchy. And we understand that as beginners, we're not likely to succeed on the first try, much like learning to walk, like what you see here on the screen. Beginnings are built for failing, and that is so beautiful. So based on what you said, on your answers here of your new beginnings, I'd like to know now, just kind of knowing what I just said, hearing what I just said, did you feel better or worse than the emotion that you typed out after you finished trying that new thing? And if you felt worse, I'm curious to know why. Felt better. Great answer. Another point for better. Awesome. Strong, relieved. These are beautiful, beautiful answers. And this is the path towards learning, and it's the path of failing as well. Where it gets really hard is in the middle of learning something, or in the middle of your success, where there's pressure to keep moving upward and keep gaining momentum. But somewhere along the way, we discover that, man, this is really hard and it's not always that fun. And it has a way of knocking down our ego. There's more at stake at this stage of being somewhere in the middle of learning, because we've picked up a few things, or maybe actually our ego has picked up a few things. And what we've learned, bear with me here, is that we know just enough to know that we don't actually know enough. Let that simmer. So as a result, we kind of fake it. We build a little cover to protect our ego and protect ourselves from getting hurt. And we might cover up our mistakes, or we throw in a lie, or we maybe self-deprecate. And we start telling ourselves that failing isn't an option, and that we can't quit now, and that we can't afford to fail. And I think that is the biggest lie we tell ourselves, because the truth is we can't afford not to fail, because failing teaches us what we can do better and where we can do better. Asking yourself why you felt worse after trying something new sheds light on how you could have handled a situation differently. And it teaches us how to be resilient and have better work ethic and how to solve problems. Like any of life's big complexities require these traits, and you 100% will encounter them. So if you want to thrive in any area of your life, you have to accept that you will fail. But not only will you move on from that failure, but you'll start to move up. So if we patted ourselves on the back a little earlier, it might have felt a little awkward and like, why are we celebrating this? But as I just mentioned a little bit ago, it's really hard to accept failure. And it's even more taboo to celebrate it. We don't cheer for embarrassing moments. When you get fired, you don't get a party. When you get rejected from a college application, you don't get a cake. Instead, we get angry and sad and upset and depressed, and the world laughs at us instead of letting us laugh it off and move on. And that's really dangerous rhetoric to listen to, is what the world tells you. Yeah, you may have royally screwed up, but there's always room for growth and improvement. And if you give in to that embarrassment or shame, your ego tells you to stop trying, stop learning, stop engaging, and stop asking. Essentially, you stop building resilience and you start living in fear. And that is far more detrimental to the long term than a little short-term embarrassment. So no doubt, what I'm trying to tell you here is that we're all going to encounter failure, and we're all going to encounter it quite a lot, actually. But I want to identify the 3 most common types of failures so that you can start getting comfortable around them and maybe invite them in for lunch and get to know them so you aren't afraid of them. Because knowledge is power, knowledge is the antidote to fear, and knowledge is the key to success. So the first kind of fear is failure to launch. Or the first kind of failure is failure to launch. And this is when you don't even try. You don't even make it off the ground because you're too afraid of the consequences. Famed author of the Harry Potter series, J.K. Rowling, understands this, that it's hard to succeed when you never show up in the first place, or when you never apply for your dream job or ask that person out on a date. The fear of the unknown consumes you to the point where you do nothing at all. And when you do nothing at all, you've failed by default. And this might be the worst type of failure because it's regret, and that sticks with you for a really long time. The second type of failure is your common everyday failure. This is what we celebrated a few minutes ago. Sleeping in, getting a C on your test. It's when, hey, shit happens and we learn, we move on. Not the end of the world. This is where also a lot of us operate. Like I said, getting a bad grade on a final or saying something rude to a friend on accident. These little daily failures generally don't stop us from living in the grand scheme of life, but I do like to think of them as little stepping stones on the path towards dealing with failure. They're great exercises in learning how to accept failure. And the things you can do, or rather the failures that you encounter every day, are opportunities to make small tweaks and adjustments in your life, whether it's an action or a behavior or a life philosophy. These have a way of keeping your ship on course. And it can be as simple as something like creating a better study plan that works for you, or apologizing to that friend, and choosing to show up every day and be a better person. The biggest takeaway, though, is that it's courageous to admit your failures. because as soon as you identify it, you can stop dwelling on your mistakes and start focusing on a solution. And that is progress. That is moving on to bigger dreams and better outcomes. Now, the third, excuse me, is epic failure. This is when trying something new doesn't totally go according to plan. Epic failures sting. They rock your world, can literally flip you upside down. These have a way of sticking with you for a long time. They confuse you, they can demoralize you, and sometimes even define you. It could be getting fired from your dream job. It could be an accident that resulted in a life-altering injury. I'm lucky to have experienced both. And they have radically changed my world for the better. They've given me a chance to assess my life values, my life goals. And more often than not, I find that when an epic failure happens, it's because I've lost sight of who I am or what I value. So these epic failures are a chance to reinvent yourself and redefine what your purpose is in life. They say a lot about your character and the type of person you are when you're dealing with how to evolve and move on from these failures. And so if you can do one thing from an epic failure, it's what is the one thing? It's to embrace them, to build greatness off the backs of your mistake. And when you do, it frees up a lot of room to do the things you actually want to do and do them a whole lot better. They teach you about your mistakes. They teach you really well and really loudly, but they teach you more about your potential for greatness. But now for the good news. So long as you put in the effort, you will always succeed. And the process is really simple. Try new things, mess up, take it all in, start over. Rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. Do that forever, because this is going to get you closer to your goal anytime and every time for that matter. So as you all regroup with your teams this afternoon, I honestly wish you nothing but failure. Today, tomorrow, during your presentation, the next day or the next day after that, till you have so many failures that it starts to look an awful lot like success. So thank you guys so much for listening. My goal wasn't obviously to scare you, but to reinforce the value and importance of failing, because it's the key to greatness and it's the key to all the good things that you ever want in life and ever want to attempt at getting. So keep failing at your swimming lessons and your video editing and your sports teams and your presentations tomorrow, because I promise you that it will get better and you'll thrive. I also want to open it up for questions too, if anybody has any. I know we have a little bit more time, so feel free to ask questions.
Stephanie, could you tell us a little bit more about Pallas Snowboards and how you guys came up with that and why you're an innovator in the market? These students are trying to be innovative in their business and marketing. And so as an entrepreneur, will you share a little bit?
Absolutely. My co-founder and I connected literally over a voicemail, a random introduction through an acquaintance. And at that time in my life, I was freelancing with not a lot of freelance work on my plate. And I was in this headspace of just saying yes to opportunities that came my way, because what's a new opportunity without trying something? And and saying yes to it. I didn't know anything about building snowboards, but fortunately my business partner did, and he had all the tools, and he was more than happy to help me learn the process. And in exchange, I brought the kind of the goals and the values and the mission to our company. And at that time in my life, I still very much am really into mountain biking, and I was into the mountain bike industry, and I saw that there wasn't a lot of brand support or industry support for female mountain bikers. And I wanted to create an event series that would welcome women into the sport and create a really welcoming community. And so when I connected with my business partner, it was essentially the same thing. It was wanting to build women's snowboards and backcountry splitboards to build really high quality women's gear. And at the time, there wasn't a lot of that on the market. There wasn't really any of it on the market. So we saw this need. We were able to identify that there's a gaping hole in this industry. And we had some resources and knowledge to be able to make that happen. And within a few months of meeting my business partner in real life, face to face, we had started working on prototypes and getting the boards into the world. It's been a slow process, but I wouldn't trade that for anything, because you know, we want to ensure that we do this right. And I see as a business owner that there are two paths that you can take. One is rapid growth, and the other is slower, more sustained growth. And we have taken the more conservative option, which I think has been much needed for us as entrepreneurs. We're learning a lot as we go along, and we're learning more and more about our market. And it enables us to really think thoroughly about what our market needs and what our customers need, and how we can best fit the conversation in that industry.
Awesome.
I see someone raise their hand. Was that a question that you have?
Yeah, I was wondering, what are your best tips on how to come back from a failure instead of just constantly thinking about what happened? What are your best tips to kind of forget about what happened and instead learn from it?
Oh, that's a great question. As an outdoor person, I would say my first instinct is to go for a walk, get away, like put down the phone. I'm sure we all probably know, even though we don't maybe like to admit it, that social media doesn't make us feel good all the time. And phones have a really easy way of just kind of being there for us. Put down the tech, shut the computer, get out of your house, and call a friend. It sounds really basic, but having a support system and having outlets for stress is critical in dealing with that bounce back, and just totally getting your mind away. Community, the power of community is very strong. It can get you out of a lot of holes when you need that. So having friends, having families, having a mentor, finding a mentor, and knowing that you're not alone in what you're experiencing. There's nearly 8 billion people on this planet, and I can guarantee that what you're experiencing is not the first time someone's experienced it. And sometimes just even telling myself that is like a reminder of, okay, I can get through this. And it's not the end of the world. What else can I suggest here? Asking questions, like asking for feedback. if you can, if that's a reasonable direction. I think that gives you some insight into maybe what your failure was, because without having really strong, concrete feedback, you might just be spinning in a loop about something you did that might not actually be the reason you failed in the first place. So getting some outside experience or perspective is also super helpful.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you mentioned that you're nervous about public speaking, and all of these students have to do public speaking tomorrow. How do you prepare and calm yourself down?
Water. Water is a great trick for giving yourself a little pause. When you're feeling kind of worked up and maybe feeling a little tense, your chest is a little tight, you're sweating a little bit, you're talking really fast, it's a reminder to slow down. Just a little sip of water helps to wet your mouth also, but gives you just a moment to kind of quickly recenter and take deep breaths. Don't get so worked up over getting everything out super fast, although I'm sure you might be running up against some time limits. So practice your speech or your presentation, and know that we're all human. We all want to hear what you're saying, and we want to listen to your presentations. We're not here to judge, we're here to learn. And I think we all often think that when we're public speaking, everyone is just out to criticize and nitpick everything we're saying. And that's not the case. Everybody here at Washington Business Week is super supportive and is here to learn and explore new ideas. So just remember that going into your presentations.